Binge drinking, 5 or more drinks in an hour. It's something that tends to be something that's plaguing young people, supposedly. High schoolers, definitely in college, the party scene, much as you can drink, as fast as you can drink. That's called binge drinking. It's actually rather dangerous. It's what people tend to do to have fun. And if you notice, again, by gender, not that much difference, male, female. Heavy drinking, binge drinking, current drinking. This is just another way of breaking it down, showing that males are a little higher, probably not surprising to you. And as we look at heavier amounts of drinking, the numbers get lower, okay? So this is clumping all 12 to 20-year-olds into the same group. Again, the numbers are in that 23% drinking currently at all, okay, that are reporting. So again, this is data that's collected every year nationwide. It's pretty well regarded as far as data goes. So that's just people who actually drink or use drugs. The people that I work with actually have a problem with that. Okay? It's one thing to drink at a party, to drink till you maybe do something really dumb. It's another thing to do that all the time, over and over again, until you have legal problems, until you have problems here, until you can't turn your homework in, until you start getting consequences. I don't know what they call them here, but some type of detention, suspension, going to treatment. Okay? And this data, those lines, that should almost look like a straight line going back to 2002. This is a little bit harder graph to interpret, but this is actually numbers in millions. So these aren't percentages. The numbers in millions of people 12 or older. So this is anybody in their survey. The youngest is 12. This is all people. If you go to 2013 on the right, 21.6 million people were determined to be substance dependent or substance abusers in 2013 in the United States. 21 million. As a percentage, that's 8%. So 8% are determined to have a substance use disorder in this country. Now for teenagers, it's a little over 5%. Thankfully, that number's been on the decline over the last few years, which is good news. But if you notice, that's pretty steady. About 8%. So if you need a visual, 8% is just a little under 1 in 10, right? A little under 10%, get the math engine primed. Okay, a little under 10%. So that means if I were to have any 10 of you stand up, 10 people who were gone out to a party, 10 people who are hanging out, 10 friends, 10 people in your class, whatever it is, we could be pretty sure that one of them would develop a substance use disorder. And that's just on average. Reality is probably more than one of them will. And then I could probably find a group of 10 randomly, but none of them would. But in any group of 10, just about one. And that's something that has existed going back about as far as I can remember. Which means alcohol and drug issues are persistent. They are real, and they impact most people. I myself am a child of an alcoholic. My dad was an alcoholic. Thankfully, I did not become one. But my guess is, if you asked around, if you're not having a problem with alcohol and drugs, you know somebody who is, or you have a family member who is. And these are things that people don't talk about. Oh, that Uncle Joey, he's just a wild guy. We're not going to go see him this weekend. Why don't we see Uncle Joey anymore? Oh, I don't know. We just never quite know what he's going to do. Okay? What happened to Granddad? He had a hard time. Why did he die when he was 55? Oh, he had liver problems. Really? Oh, that's really sad. Why don't we ever talk about Granddad? Oh, I don't know. These are things that are secrets. What we know about alcohol and drug problems, though, is that if it's genetic, if you actually have this in your family, you are a lot more likely to become one of these people, a person with a disorder. These are good things to know. They're hard things to talk about. But if you want to do yourself a big favor, It's going to be really challenging for you over the next few years. I can look into a crystal ball. You will be encountered by these things all the time. And you're going to want to do it. And many, many, many of you will. Okay? You can do yourself a huge favor and find out if there's any issues in your family if you don't know currently. If this is something that you all haven't talked about growing up, see what you can find out. Because if it's there, especially if it's there a lot, I would pretty much guarantee you that this is going to be something you may struggle with. Okay? So it's something that would be good to ask your family. Remember when I said that when you start actually matters? Well, if you have a lot of people in your family that actually have had problems with alcohol or drugs, you are very much at risk. If you decide to try these things and do these things at an earlier age, you are that much more at risk. So this is alcohol dependence or abuse in the past year among adults aged 21 or older. So they asked a bunch of adults who were 21 who could legally drink. They could say to them, all right, what was the age of use? When did you first have a drink? When did you first have a drink? The light blue is alcohol abuse. The dark blue is alcohol dependence. Any of those are considered a substance use disorder. So, if we look at this, 15% of people who had a substance use disorder had their first drink 14 or younger. Okay? Now that doesn't mean that everybody that has a drink 14 and younger will develop one. It just says that if the people that did started then. Notice what happens if they waited a couple of years. That number drops down to 9%. A couple of years later, 18 to 20. Still not legal, but 18 to 20, it's the college years, right? Drops down to just under 5%. 21 or older, if they waited, it drops down to 2.3%. Now, there's a number of reasons for that. One of them is it takes a little while for your body to become dependent on alcohol. You can hold your liquor for a long time before your body starts to say, gosh, this is not good. Alcohol is one of the hardest substances in that way. It's also one of the hardest to get off when you develop the problem because your liver becomes dependent, and it's one of the only substances that they have to hospitalize you when you decide to stop. If you get that bad with alcohol, they have to put you in a hospital because your liver might fail, which is what happened to my dad. My dad in his late 50s, early 60s, decided he was going to stop, mainly because the doctor said if you don't, you're going to probably die in a week or two. So he had to be hospitalized because when he decided to stop, his body had become so dependent on the alcohol that he wasn't going to live. Thankfully, he decided to stop. He's still living today. Point being, that doesn't happen when you're 20. That doesn't happen when you're 15. People can drink a lot and not see many problems other than maybe legal problems or something that they may do while they're not conscious. But this is something that the people that do develop a problem are more likely to do so if they start their drinking younger. Okay. Now, I'm not just trying to come out here and just scare people. One of the things that the studies have also shown is things like Scared Straight, where they go take kids like you to prison and show you what it's like and have prisoners yell at you and say, if you don't straighten up, you'll be in here with me. They've shown those just don't work. It just doesn't work. It's a terrible thing. It's a terrible thing to do. The worst thing it's going to do is maybe scare you that day. And then you're going to come back and go, well, that's not me, that's him. And so I realized that in me showing you these statistics, it's very easy for you to go, well, that's not me. That's not. Part of the reason I'm showing them to you is as it starts to become you, hopefully you'll have a place to turn for help, because I've worked with plenty of people your age who said the very same thing and it became them. But also realizing that most of you won't develop a problem with this, and if you want to have some skills to avoid it, they are out there. Here are some people that actually were not able to overcome it. It hits every generation, okay? So in my generation, one of the first big deaths was that guy up on the top left. Notice he has college across his shirt. He made a movie that most people, when they go to college now, try to live out that movie. A lot of people called Animal House. That's John Belushi. John Belushi made a huge movie in 1978 called Animal House. Many of you may see that if you've not already. It's got party culture in college, et cetera, et cetera. He was dead 4 years later. 1982, heroin overdose. Okay. Guy in the top right, a little more current, that's Corey Monteith. He was on a popular TV show called Glee. Actually was trying to get some help with his heroin problem. Left treatment early, went out, tried to use the same amount of heroin that he'd always used at parties. It's a problem. Heroin's one of those substances that if you stop using it for a while, your body breaks down its ability to handle it. You come out, you can use the same amount you always used to use. It's going to blow you up. He died just a couple months after leaving a treatment center from heroin usage. Age, 31. About the same age as John Belushi. Movie out right now about that woman down the bottom left. She had a big song called Rehab. They said I should go to rehab. I said, no, no, no. My daddy said I didn't need it. Sadly, that was an autobiographical song. She was writing about real life. She actually could have used rehab. She was, it's Amy Winehouse, 27. 27 when she died. And this guy right here, on the bottom right, Philip Seymour Hoffman. Philip Seymour Hoffman wasn't in his 30s. He's a little older, a lot more successful. Had actually had, I want to say something like 10 or 15 years of sobriety when he went in, relapsed on heroin, overdosed, and died. Amy Winehouse, I think they said, drank herself to death. Now, I put these people up here in part because they're prominent, partly because you've probably known them, and partly because every generation has them. The other thing is, they were all using alcohol and drugs at a very early age. They all had a lot of success. They all had an awful lot to live for. They were entertainers. And sadly, they're no longer with us. This will continue to happen. You will continue to hear people in the spotlight who die, who are famous, and aren't able to handle their alcohol or drug usage. Then we have people like this. Not famous. You don't know any of these people. At least I don't think. Bergen County, which just happens to be where my wife grew up, in New Jersey. When I showed her this article, her mouth kind of opened up like, oh my gosh. Matter of fact, one of them went to the high school she went to. It's a very well-to-do suburb. It reminds you a lot of Brentwood, Bergen County. That's where these three kids went to school. They're all dead. They died from drug problems. And after they died, the mother of one of them, I believe the boy on the right, Daniel, wrote a letter for the newspaper. And she was writing an open letter to parents and friends of these kids. It's a pretty compelling letter if you want some emotional read. But I thought I'd read just a couple lines from it because she wrote some of it to people like you. Keep this in mind, please. Keep this in mind if you ever know of someone who's struggling. The unwritten code of teenagers is to keep silent about anything you know that may cause you to lose a friend. Nobody wants to rat out a friend, right? If you know somebody today that's kind of messing around with this, you're not going to go tell on them, right? That would be like the worst thing you could do, right, in your mind, right? Because it might cause you to lose a friend. She calls that the code of teenagers. This is the way it is and the way it always was. We all have to learn a new code, though, a code that can save a life. Having a friend be mad at you is different than having a friend or their child that is dead. You only lose a friend when they are gone forever. That friend will thank you someday, and their family may be spared the agony my family is living through right now. There is a new normal out there that is beyond most of our comprehension. Anyone who knows their friends are making bad choices using drugs that are deadly, or parents who know their kids are using drugs but didn't reach out to warn the parents of their friends to look out, please break the code, open up your mouth, and tell their families. It wasn't until Danny, boy on the right, died that we found out how many of his friends knew what he was doing. Matter of fact, it turns out everybody in the town did, but she somehow didn't. Okay? We also learned that one of his friends A friend that he had had since age 6 was in rehab. His mother didn't even call me and warn me to look out for my son. Had someone tipped us off, it may have taken a while to process, but we would have at least been looking out for signs. Schools and police departments have a place in this at some point, but first and foremost, kids should have a safe method of informing so they will actually do it. Be creative, find ways in the communities to let kids know to break the code. My hope is that this school and this scholar will be a safe place for you to do that. If you know somebody who's struggling or you're scared about a friend, because this may not be you, it could be a friend, and don't assume that the parents know. We can go a long way with our head in the sand if there's something going on that we don't want to look at. But if you're seeing it, it might not be the worst thing to let someone know that they need help. Keep that in mind someday as you go through high school and these things pop up for you. Because if this person had known, when she later after he died and she went into his room, she found all kinds of evidence that he had been using. She worked from home. She said her office at home was right next to his bedroom. She had no clue. You guys are good. Especially those of you who are successful. I have 2 young sons, one who's about to turn 13, one who just turned 10 this weekend. We love our kids, especially when you all are having success and you all are doing well. We have no reason to suspect that anything could be wrong. Okay? The longer you're able to hold that up, the longer you're able to do these things. If you have a fear or concern about a friend, find a way, even if it's confidentially, to tip those parents off so they may get some help. I know you worry that they're going to get in trouble, but better to have some trouble than dead. Because at this point, it's probably not a horrible problem. Over time, it could be. All of these people have just recently finished high school, like they're 17, 18 years old. I love this ad. So, why do most 16-year-olds drive like they're missing a part of their brain? Because they are. All right, so your brain is developing. I'm sure you're pretty smart. You can feel like it's certainly more developed than it was 5 years ago. But it's not fully developed. Now, granted, you haven't had a lobotomy. You're not really missing that part of your brain. But that's the part of the brain that develops last. It's the part of your brain that's not fully developed. Do you know what that part of the brain is called? Anybody? Prefrontal cortex. You know what its more commonly known nickname is? Or what its function is? The executive function. It's the executive function of the brain. So some of you probably know in companies we have the corporate executive, the CEO, the executive of the company, the executive director. That person is the person that's in charge. So the brain's a very complex thing. It's doing lots of stuff. That part of the brain is the part that keeps everything in line. The emotions, the memories, the impulses, all that stuff. It's the last part of the brain to develop, the executive function. Anybody know about how old you are when that's fully developed? Yes? 25. 25. So it will not be fully developed when you leave MBA. It won't be fully developed when you leave college. I like to remind, I teach a lot of undergrads over at Vanderbilt. You know, the kids that are getting the 1600s on the SAT, that kind of stuff. I always love to remind them. Your brain's not fully developed, nor will it be when you finish school. And yet, in our country, age 18 is adulthood. You get to make decisions at 18. You take charge of your life. Historically, a lot of people are pushed out of the house at 18. You're on your own. Gosh, they got 7 years to go. Okay. Here's it graphically. This is this young girl. There's her brain. Okay? Prefrontal cortex is that spot right at the bottom. It's getting closer all the way up through 20. And the rest of the brain kind of fills in in blue. But you notice how it moves from back to front. Back is much more emotions, the impulses, okay? All the way to the front. Executive function, rationality, decisions, thinking it all through, okay? Connecting all the dots. One thing that we've learned about adolescence is that actually the adolescents are really, really good at computing risk. So we used to think that adolescents took a lot more risks. All those risky teens must be their hormones raging, okay? Well, that's not really true. It is true that teenagers tend to take a lot more risk, but part of it is they calculate risk a lot better than I do, or any of the adults in this room. Matter of fact, you may know all the stats. You may be able to tell me if you get behind the wheel of a car and you've been drinking, what the chances are that you'll wreck that vehicle. You may look at all that data I just showed you, and you'll go, okay, so that means that, gosh, only 15% of people are going to develop a problem. Let's drink away. This is the problem. You all can compute risk and remember data better than adults, but that's quantitative. What you don't do is assess the risk qualitatively well. That's what comes later. So you see a lot of adults who can calculate it out and say, well, there's like 1% chance that this could go wrong, so they're not going to do it. And you can go, gosh, they're living in fear, embrace it, embrace life. Well, that's a good thing for young people to do, is kind of embrace those things. But adults have calculated it out and go, well, gosh, if something happens in that 10% of chance that it's going to happen, I'll lose everything. It's not worth it. It's not worth it to lose a leg. It's not worth it to have brain damage. I'm just not going to do it. Adults are pretty good at doing that. Adolescents, on the other hand, not so good. But they can cite these numbers really, really well, and they often make decisions based on the quantitative. But like any good executive, they have to take both the data and the qualitative nature of that data into making a decision. Both the gut and the head in trying to make a decision. This is why adolescents and young people are the most vulnerable to addiction. Because they will take some of these risks. Their brain is developing. Now think about it. We go back to that very simple ad. The brain frying, the egg frying. Really simple. It's not really an egg. That's another problem with ads like that. For people who are very concrete, they go, gosh, my brain's not an egg. That's silly. Pass the Tabasco. Okay, these are the people that are typing in on YouTube in their response. However, if you start to put substances into your brain that control your emotions, that hijack your decision making, that feel really, really good, then you're probably going to start wanting to have those substances when those emotions arise, especially if they're uncomfortable. We know that drugs do some very good things. They help us control our anxiety. They help us stay focused. My guess is many of you in this room might have prescribed medications that help you do just those things. Okay? They would do those things for people for whom they're not prescribed. And as your brain starts to develop and continues developing, it develops a dependence on that substance just to deal with things like unpleasant feelings. Athletes have been known, obviously, to use substances to gain a performance edge. It's rampant through sports, right? Surprised they can even hold the Tour de France, right? The bike race. And people still try to find that way because they've gotten so used to performing on the substances, they can't imagine not. When you look at statistics of people who really were and then stopped, we see that their performance just drops. Baseball's full of hitters from the 90s who hit 50 home runs for 1 year and then didn't hit 10 again. You're like, what the heck happened? Well, maybe they stopped using substances. That's tough when that's been your key to getting $10 million a year. Well, bring it into the real world, that's tough when that's your key to getting in relationships. Oh, he's so funny when he drinks. When you feel awkward and uncomfortable going into a party, that's your key to getting through the party. Well, when that becomes your only way of dealing socially, you're going to keep doing it. Because you're training the executive function that I had up there a few minutes ago to handle things with a substance involved. And the more you use it, the more you need it. And the more your friends do it, the more likely you do it. That's the other thing that we've learned about adolescents. When given the choice of something to do, and they measure brainwaves on this, if they look at their parents doing it, they may go, oh, that's probably the right thing to do, but I don't know, that doesn't look like I really want to do it. When they see their friends doing it, there's a spike. They want to do it. It's amazing to watch when they measure these things with the brain. There's a pull towards doing it because friends or peers are doing it. We've known this for a long time, but we now have brain science that kind of backs it up. We also know that substances start to interfere with the brain's functioning over time. It can change mood, hurt our ability to think clearly, interfere with sleep, actually change the structure. We think it may shrink it, but I think what it does is it delays its growth because the brain's also not fully grown at your age. And so if it stunts the growth, then that means your brain doesn't get as big. Things to keep in mind when something feels like you really want to do it. This is the debate. This is some things to have ready for that debate, should you ever have it. A lot of people say, this is nature's herb. Everybody should be able to do it. It really isn't addictive. But these things aren't really true. And they actually do impact, the studies that we've started to see come out actually do affect educational outcomes. 78% of the 2.4 million people who began using last year were 12 to 20. Not 78% of 12 to 20-year-olds, but 78% of the people that started using marijuana last year were in that age group. This is the group that media is targeting. It did it with cigarettes. It's not with alcohol. Now it's moved to its new substance. And so you'll get bombarded with ads, especially if it gets legal, because they want you to use it, because it's market-driven. The perception of harm, we can look at that other charts that show that it's decreasing, which of course would mean use will increase. And this itself is not brain science. And we're learning that there's a number of negative things that happen from marijuana usage, some consequences. Impairing short-term memory, attention, judgment, cognitive functions, impairing coordination and balance, increasing heart rate. Psychotic episodes don't happen very often, but there are people who are susceptible to that, especially people who are taking other medications that are prescribed. The interaction effects can lead to psychotic episodes, which can be kind of scary. Things crawling up your walls or all your arms and stuff. It can impair memory and learning skills, sleep impairment. Not things that people really should want to do if they're wanting to succeed in school. Okay? These are the things to keep in mind. The compelling thing about it is that it tends to be used at parties without the same negative after effects as alcohol, right? Alcohol has hangovers. You don't hear about hangovers with marijuana. So that's a compelling reason for a lot of people to give it a shot. The other thing is, I've been told it will help with my anxiety, calm me out. Perhaps. But again, going back to what we said before, if that becomes your coping mechanism for anxiety, as your brain's developing, your brain's not going to know how to cope with its anxiety well without it. And when it starts to have these other side effects, you may not want to actually use it anymore. That will be a problem because then you'll feel anxious when you don't have it. Same basic thing happened with nicotine, which is why a lot of people, I used to remember going into movie theaters and everybody smoked. Like you'd go to a movie theater like this and there was a movie showing, cloud of smoke. Everybody smoked. It was only recently that even bowling alleys stopped it. Then I started going to bowling alleys again. Smoke everywhere. Maybe going to a point where it's that with pot smoke everywhere. And that kind of funny. It's a concert, right? Cool, But if that's the case, then the media has won. Marketers have won. And then we'll have to deal with this ramification later. Okay? And it can lead to addiction or dependence. That's something, it's actually in Chemical Manual for years and years and years. So, like I said, a fun debate to engage in. So here's some reasons to avoid drugs. They can mess with your mind. They can mess with your body, your wallet. They're not cheap. Of course, you can bypass that if you steal them, break into somebody's house to get them. Now you've become a criminal. Mess with travel plans. A lot of countries won't let you in as easily if you have a drug conviction. Mess with your life, obviously, in a lot of ways. Mess with the planet. And a lot of, you've got to realize oftentimes the people that are growing this and supplying it, the award that I was given that she mentioned was from the Office of National Drug Control Policy. They're also known as the Drug Czar, in charge of the drug war. That's a real problem, the drug war in our country. It's causing an awful lot of issues worldwide, and it's driven by people who want drugs. Okay. Mess with society, mess with love life and fertility. They do actually negatively affect those things, especially with males. And ultimately, they can hurt hopes and dreams. So how to respond? I'm certainly not naive enough to think that this talk will have anything to do with that moment that you encounter it being used and you want to. The thought that all of this stuff will just pop into your mind is I'm definitely not naive enough to think that. A lot of this is seed planting. And what we've learned is that a lot of times the reasons that people start using, even when they don't want to, is because they haven't developed the skills to know how to avoid it. And usually once you're in the situation and you're surrounded by people and they're doing it, the ability to just say no is virtually impossible, or very difficult, which is why the Just Say No campaign ended up getting as much ridicule as support. So a lot of what you do is what you set yourself up for when that moment happens. Because it will, if it hasn't already, multiple times. Okay? And these are just some pointers. Prepare yourself for those occasions. As much as you can, try to associate with people that you know aren't actively doing that, which, by the way, makes it very difficult for the people who do become addicted as teenagers, because when they go back into their old schools again, the people that have done number 2 don't want to have anything to do with those people who are trying to get clean and sober, which is why schools like recovery high schools exist. But I would also encourage you, if this is not something you're engaging in and you have a friend that goes off to rehab and they come back, you might be the most valuable friend they could have, because they need to hang out with people like you. Similarly, if you become a person that struggles with this and you go to rehab, hopefully you can find some friends who don't use that you can hang out with. The recidivism rate for people who go to rehab of your age is 80%. I mean, they are back to using drugs again within 6 months to a year, in part because they couldn't make friends or find friends that didn't use, so they go back to using again. Multiple episodes, okay? Find friends you can talk about these things with, that you can feel, even if it's just one, that you can process this with. You can talk about this, okay? Try to keep your future in mind. If your future seems vague and fuzzy, think about that brain, the blue part of the brain developing, and think about anything that you're putting into your body is helping that or hindering that. Think about that, because that's real. That's happening right now. Okay? Just keep that in mind. Future doesn't have to be 10 years down the line. It could be tomorrow. Okay? Remember the stars I put up there? Many of them die from taking drugs, etc. Forgive yourself if you make a mistake. If you do something along this line, if you actually have done something that you look back on as stupid, you do drink, you do some drugs, you do something stupid while you're doing it, that's not the reason to just say, yeah, heck with it, I might as well go whole hog now. That's actually one of the things the kids that I work with who are alcohol and drug addicts, so they can build up like maybe a year of sobriety, a whole year of not using alcohol or drugs. They go to a party, this really wild party, and they slip. They drink. They smoke. They get in a car, everybody's smoking, they smoke. And they go, oh, heck with it, I've just screwed everything up. They start using again. If we can intercept that process and say, gosh, you know something? You made a mistake. So what? Now let's start with the rest of your life today. You'll be okay. But I think a lot of times when people have done something stupid or done something they regret because their brain isn't fully developed, it's going to happen. It even happens to those of us with fully developed brains quite a lot. Forgive yourself and try to keep going back to what you know is right. Okay? Develop answers for peers. If you're not wanting to do something, have an answer in mind. I don't know, it's going to kind of depend on the group that you hang out with. For me, it's actually worked fairly well over the years if I didn't want to get involved in something to say, well, my dad almost died, and it runs through my family. His dad, or his grandfather died from this. I think I'm just not going to get into that. Sometimes that just kind of get, whoa, okay, that's a party kill right there. But they're often not going to force you to do something if it's something that you or your family has had a hard time with. Okay? But you can think of what you might want to say. Walking away. That always works. We learned that in elementary school, right? If you don't want to participate in a game with people, just walk away. Okay. My wife is a school counselor, and she teaches the Kelso curriculum with the Kelso the frog. I don't know if any of you have ever experienced Kelso the frog, but that's one of Kelso's things for little children. Just walk away. Play a new game. You too can do that even now in your wise old years of high school. Walk away, play a new game. Okay? Avoid future encounters if you know if you're going to fall into the hole, avoid the hole. If you kind of know that's what this group of people is going to be doing, try to avoid that group of people. Of course, that becomes harder if that's the group of people you want to be a part of. Changing the subject, or like I said, stating facts. These all will help prepare you for those circumstances and those times where this becomes a challenge. Guessing you don't have a lot of questions, but if anybody does, or anything I could clarify, or anything that you would like to throw out there, I'm glad to try to answer anything that you're wondering about. Alcohol and drug issues. How to get help. One thing that I would like to encourage you as I go back to, if you know people who are struggling with this, try to find a confidential way to give them help. In my school that I ran, that was a recovery high school, I actually was the principal of the school. I could kick people out like that. And we set up a system where if they came into my office and told me that another kid had relapsed, I guarded that like it was some confidential memo. No one in the school would know. And I went to great lengths to protect it. I had all kinds of ways to protect that person's identity. And you may think you're the only person that knows, but I often would urge you to step off of that grandiosity just because you think, oh, I'm the only one that can know this. Usually that's not true. There's probably others that know. But you might be the only person that's willing to go help that person out. And if you can find somebody to say something to get that person help, you may have that friend tomorrow. And if it just so happens to be you, I also urge you to try to get yourself some help if this happens to you down the line as well, and learn what your resources are. All right, well, thank you very much for having me today. I enjoyed being here. Have a great school year.